Welcome back to These Things Are Written. We continue our study from Acts. We are starting chapter 7 today. Remember in chapter 6, Stephen, one of the elders, one of the deacons, I should say, put in charge of the daily distribution of food, does great miracles and is accused of wanting to destroy the holy place, speaking against the holy place and against Moses by the rulers, the chief priests. He's being held trial before the Sanhedrin. And after they make the accusation, the high priest says, beginning with verse 1, "Are these things so?" And Stephen said, giving his defense, "Brothers and fathers, hear me. The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he lived in Haran, and said to him, 'Go out from your land and from your kindred and go into the land that I will show you.' Then he went out from the land of the Chaldeans and lived in Haran. And after his father died, God removed him from there into this land in which you are now living. Yet he gave him no inheritance in it, not even a foot's length, but promised to give it to him as a possession and to his offspring after him, though he had no child. And God spoke to this effect, that his offspring would be sojourners in a land belonging to others, which would enslave them and afflict them for 400 years. But I will judge the nations that they serve, said God, and after that they shall come out and worship me in this place. And he gave him the covenant of circumcision. And so Abraham became the father of Isaac and circumcised him on the 8th day. And Isaac became the father of Jacob, and Jacob of the 12 patriarchs. And the patriarchs, jealous of Joseph, sold him into Egypt, but God was with him and rescued him out of his afflictions and gave him favor and wisdom before Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, who made him ruler over Egypt and over all his household. Now there came a famine throughout all Egypt and Canaan, and great affliction, and our fathers could find no food. But when Jacob heard that there was grain in Egypt, he sent out our fathers on their first visit. And on the second visit, Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And Joseph's family became known to Pharaoh. And Joseph sent and summoned Jacob, his father, and all his kindred, 75 persons in all. And Jacob went down into Egypt, and he died, he and our fathers. And they were carried back to Shechem and laid in the tomb that Abraham had bought for a sum of silver from the sons of Hamor in Shechem. This is the word of the Lord. Now, as Stephen begins his defense, he brings out two words to identify who he is speaking to. First of all, brothers. He identifies with them as a fellow Jew, as someone that can relate to them, who knows their beliefs, their understanding, their religion. And then he says, fathers, showing respect to the Sanhedrin council, even though he was about to school them in the history of Israel and what it meant. As he gives this history lesson, he's setting a pattern that he would use throughout this time. And really, it's a pattern that is throughout the Old Testament. God shows grace, and that grace is received and yet met with disobedience. To that, God continues to give grace. But this pattern of grace and disobedience, he shows through Abraham. God's grace was given to Abraham through the promises that God gave to him. The promises that he would be the father of a great nation, and that his own descendants would possess the land that he was on, the promised land. This disobedience was met, Stephen points out, by the patriarchs, by the sons of Jacob, as they sold Joseph into slavery. Yet God's promise remains. God's grace remains upon Joseph and upon even the people who sold him into slavery. You see, even in the midst of our disobedience, God's grace remains with us. when, or should I say, if we sin, God forgives, God restores, and God continues to love. To him be the glory forever. Amen.